Welcome back to the Balancing Act podcast. I'm Andy Tempty. On the Balancing Act, we talk to business leaders and industry experts to explore the balancing acts we play in our professional lives and learn about the events that put rocket boosters behind their career success. Today, we have Dr. Janna Koretz joining us. Dr. Koretz is the founder of Azimuth Psychological and is focused on therapy for the unique mental health challenges faced by individuals in high-pressure careers. So today's topic is going to be burnout. Welcome to the show, Dr. Koretz.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So I ask all my guests this question. Please tell our listeners the short version of your story.
Sure. So the short version of how I came to build Azimuth, I guess, is in college, I was first introduced to psychology, and I thought it was fascinating that there are sort of these unknown reasons why people are the way they are or why they act the way they act. It was just so interesting to read about, and that's sort of what sucked me in. And so over time, I went to grad school, I became a psychologist, and I really wanted to open a firm that had a unique perspective and was able to help a lot of people. And so that's how Azimuth came to be. That's how we ended up specializing in high pressure careers, because I really wanted to make sure that we were hitting a population that may not have, been paid so much attention to, I guess, in the past.
Excellent. If you had to pick an event in your life that just really put rocket boosters behind your career, what would that be?
There was a point, I think, in graduate school when I decided that I should take more risks. And I wasn't quite sure what that meant, but I knew that I was sort of a person that wasn't very risk tolerant. So once I decided to take more risks, calculated risks, but risks nonetheless, I was able to think more creatively and broadly about my own career and where I was going to go with that.
And what was the process like to build Azimuth? Can you give us the elevator pitch for our listeners? In the kind of sea of consultancies out there, what makes Azimuth unique?
Yeah. So we are the only practice that I know of a group of psychologists who have clinical backgrounds who apply all of that knowledge to people in high pressure careers. And we can do that two different ways. We're pretty familiar with the nuances of high pressure careers. What does it actually mean to make partner in a law firm? What does it mean to join a private equity firm? And a lot of times our clients have been to therapy before, and they're smart. They know should really technically be right, eating more vegetables, sleeping, all those things, sleeping more, but they can't because of the nature of their life. And they don't feel like people really understand that about them. So we have sort of that broad perspective and can kind of help with like missed promotions, C-suite problems, all kind of like relationship communication problems in terms of, coworkers and things like that. But we also help on a deeper level because a lot of that stuff is not about that. It's about things underneath. So it's about people's family of origin, how they were brought up, their emotions, how much substances they're using, how they feel about themselves, their personal relationships. And so we have the clinical knowledge to apply in that scenario as well. And so we can kind of do both pieces. And I think one thing I feel very strongly about is that I know why it happened, but I think mental health is much too medicalized. And I think people still really feel like something has to be wrong. There has to be a labeled, identified problem for them to seek out therapy. And I think people still have a misunderstanding about what therapy looks like and what it means. And that none of that is true. A lot of people who come to us because of the way in which we framed ourselves are people who don't necessarily think they have a specific issue, but they know they're unhappy and they know something is not working. And they have the feeling it has to do with their job. Not always, but most of the time. And so then that's how they end up getting a lot of really useful information. Psychologists are the people who spend all this time studying the human condition, and people don't realize that information can apply to everything. And so why not seek that out? And so that's kind of how we came to be and why we come from sort of a different angle than a lot of other firms.
Yeah, I was shocked when I was going through marriage counseling with my wife, and I'm listening to all the line of questioning that we're going through. It's obviously a very difficult time, but A lot of the lessons that we were learning were equally applicable, and some are even more applicable in the world of work and
Yeah.
how to deal with one's career. So, how do we, going a bit off script here, but how do we make therapy more accessible to more people and break down those barriers of, oh, there must be something wrong with me if I want to engage in therapy?
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up actually side note about the marriage counseling. We see a lot of co-founders for therapy as like a couple because so much of it is exactly the same.
Yeah.
And so everything is applicable to work and home because they are lessons and skills and things like that. But to answer your question, I think people can't be afraid of therapy. And I think like anything else, right? If you, I don't know, you want to, you hire a plumber, right? You want to hire a plumber who really knows about the problems you're having, and, how are they going to fix it? How are they going to do a great job? You want them to be skillful. I mean, therapy is really no different. And finding a good fit and just seeking out the people who can help you the most, I think is a kind of a little bit of a different frame than I have a problem that needs fixing, if you will, because you're just gaining more information and insights about yourself and your world around you, which can only ever be helpful.
Yeah, this concept of shame that there must be something wrong, and I feel this sense of shame that I'm getting help for the the thing that makes it all work. Those are the walls that we have to break down. Do you agree?
I do agree. And I'm not sure I have the roadmap for that because it is certainly better than it was, let's say, when I was growing up. But there's still a lot of misconception about what it is and what it means even to be depressed, let's say. Let's take that as an example. There are plenty of people walking around who have really severe depression. And I think what people imagine that to look like in someone is really only some of the time or a little of the time. There are a lot of people who are really high functioning who are really suffering. And to kind of keep that in mind too, that you can have both, right? You can have all these struggles and things and also, run a company or go to work and be successful or write research papers or whatever.
Yeah, I just like to punch the point for our listeners here because what I'm hearing and how I'm translating it is everybody is walking around with their own baggage. Everybody's got their stuff that they're dealing with. And, the concept of empathy and compassion in business is almost kind of a recognition that that everybody that you're talking to in any moment of any day is carrying that baggage around, and it may be affecting them in certain ways, and it has an impact on their work. So let's shift gears, kind of taking a step back to anxiety in the workforce. From your perspective, what are the main drivers, some of the main drivers of the heightened anxiety levels that we're seeing in our workforce today? I'm just seeing everybody just seems so stressed out and this huge weight, walking around this huge weight on their shoulders. What are some of the main drivers?
I think we have the bigger issues, right? The economy, political stuff, right? That's separate. But on a smaller scale, I think a lot of the younger generation has grown up with cell phones. And I don't know if you're familiar with Jonathan Haidt's work about that. So I think a lot of the cell phone use and social media has produced an anxious generation, which is the title of his new book, actually. And so I think a lot of the constant connectedness, and not only is it, everybody knows now that, it's a comparative, right? You're on Instagram and I'm not as good as this person, even though that's absolutely curated. And it does feel like everyone else doesn't have any baggage because of the way they present themselves. And I do. And we now know that that's really dangerous for people. But it's also this constant connection, which is similar to work, which is also what produces, a lot of anxiety. Is there is no separation between work time and home time anymore, partly because of the phones and the computers and email and things like that. You're just so accessible and people are always scrolling, and it's really tempting to just go into your email real quick and see if whatever happened, and then you can't put it down. You feel like you have to respond. And we don't live in a culture that supports like rest or vacation. Everything is very go, 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 now, suck it up, do it better, too bad for you. This is how it's done. And so, that's going to make anybody anxious and burnt out and tired and apathetic. And then people become unable to do their job well because of those reasons. And then it sort of spirals from there, because then they feel even worse about themselves and have a harder time. So it goes on and on and on. So I think those are some of the main factors that we're seeing anyway.
Yeah, I was talking to another guest about this exact subject, and I grew up. I'm 61 years old, so when I was a kid in my teens, my whole life was not on display for everyone to see, and these visions of perfection that are out there. Dr. Koretz, what I find is that vulnerability, constructive vulnerability, can almost be somewhat of a release valve for whenever I'm feeling anxious. If I just get vulnerable with myself first, and then potentially with a trusted mentor or coach that helps relieve some of that. But let's talk tools. I teach a management course at my undergraduate alma mater, the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. My students feel a crushing level of anxiety as they're graduating seniors. They're entering the workforce. Let's run a thought experiment. You have one of my students sitting in front of you right now. What's one tool that you'd recommend that they start using to gain more control?
Well, we do a lot of work actually around personal values, which is also something that people don't talk a lot about. And I think part of the reason is people sort of assume the values around them. So family of origin, things that are important to you, just kind of grow up assuming that those things are correct. Or, you're in a workplace and you get sucked into that culture, and it's very insidious, right? So then all of the values of the workplace become your values, so you think. But in reality, that's not really what's important to you. And no one has given the permission for everybody to think about what their personal values, which do also change over time. As you get older, life happens to you, perspectives change, and that's okay. And so I think really thinking about what's important, why it's important, and then figuring out how to integrate that a little bit more into your life. I mean, when you're in graduate school, let's say, or even work, it's impossible to make changes and find time. Like, we understand that, but there are ways to do it in a small way. And I think people don't like that answer because it's not very exciting to say adding little bits here and there, but that is what makes people feel differently, and what makes their mindset shift is entering into little small pockets of change over and over. And so I think the values work is just super important. And, we're actually coming out with an app about that in the new year, because I feel really strongly about it, that once people sort of get grounded in themselves, then all the decisions become very clear, because you know why you're making them.
Yeah. So after the break, we're going to talk about personal purpose and the alignment with purpose at work. I love what you said, that, folks don't really love the answer, that small changes, really keeping after it, I'm a continuous improvement and organizational health guy. So, small changes over time. I'm also a finance guy, so I understand the concept of compound interest. Small changes, small deposits in yourself over time can grow into big returns. But we live in this, what have you done for me lately? Big shiny balls, the Ozempic, I'm going to get thin fast kind of mindset. But just staying after it, continuous improvement works. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think one analogy one of my clients once gave was she was trying all of these things to get more in shape. She wanted to run a marathon one day, and she hadn't been exercising at all. And so she bought these shoes. She did this plan. She did all this really complicated stuff. She joined a Facebook group that was about optimization of time. So she got a Garmin, and she was, everything was about these details about performance. And what she said was none of it really was working for her. And what she realized at the end of the day is that she just had to go to the gym. and run. Like that was it. You just need to run further. And yeah, you need a plan certainly for marathon training. But she was like, I was overcomplicating it. All I needed to do is just do the same thing over and over and over again. And then I got really good. And I think that that's a great analogy for all these small changes. It's like no one just wants to go to the gym. It's so boring. But that's where it is. So.
Yeah. And for our golfer friends out there, you do not need a new set of clubs.
That's right.
You need to practice the small things over and over again. Dr. Koretz, we're going to take a really short commercial break and we'll be right back on The Balancing Act. Hey, it's Andy here. I've got a new podcast I'd like to introduce you to, The Saturday Morning Muse. Start your weekend with me by exploring topics that span leadership, business management, education, and other musings that are designed to support your journey of personal and professional continuous improvement. Subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform. And we're back with Dr. Janna Koretz talking about anxiety and burnout in the workplace. Let's continue today's conversation with the concept of enmeshment. So this is a term that we have not talked about on the show up to this point. What does this term mean for our listeners, and how does enmeshment evidence itself in a leader?
Sure. And this is so important. We coined this term because, this is what we've been seeing for so long, and I don't really understand why people are not talking about it. But career enmeshment is when your whole identity gets wrapped up into your career. And so this happens for a lot of reasons, but certainly because people are spending more and more time at work, they have less and less time to do anything else. And so usually what happens then, like anything else, right? Things don't go perfectly. People miss a promotion, their company gets acquired, they get laid off. Something happens where they don't have their job in the same way anymore, or they don't have it at all. And they fall apart because they don't know who they are anymore. They don't know what to do with their time. They don't even know what they like. They're completely lost, and it brings on a lot of existential questions because what have I been spending my time doing? What is important to me? Like, why am I here? And people can get really caught up into a lot of, difficult times with that because they are big questions that you can't answer quickly. And, if then you decide that work was not where you wished you had spent all that much time, then you have to mourn the loss of the time that you wished you had spent doing other things and the regret around that. And so it's a really complicated thing that happens. And a lot of people can see it also just in retirement. When people retired and then what? They just don't really know what to do, and people can become really depressed, anxious, things like that.
Well, you're talking to a former leader who has dealt with various forms of enmeshment throughout my career. So let's suppose you have an executive sitting in front of you right now, which you do. I was frazzled and consumed by my career, not so much anymore, but let's just suppose you're talking to a younger version of me. When asked if I was burned out at that time, I would snap, "No, I'm just fine. I'm tough. I'm resilient. I just keep powering through. I never burn out." How do you help this individual recognize that they are indeed burned out and that there is a better way?
Well, my job isn't necessarily to tell people what they are or aren't, but my job is to help them identify things that are not working for them and why they're not working and how they might get around that. So maybe you don't identify with being burnt out. That's fine. But you're obviously not feeling great, right? Or there's, I don't know if this was the case for you, but when sometimes people come to us, right, their home life is very challenged because of the time that they spend at work. They're getting a lot of pressure from all angles to do other things. There's just a lot of unpleasantness that can be identified. And then we kind of get into what those are and the motivation behind doing or not doing those things. And then people can kind of come to the conclusion of what it is that's working and not working for them. And then if they want to make changes, we figure out how to slowly do that. But I think when people are upset at all, right? If you have someone who's upset in your life, you tell them to calm down. Are they going to calm down? They are not going to calm down. They are certainly not. So it's kind of the same idea when people come in and they're like, I'm fine. It's like, you can be fine, but like, do you like this version of fine? Because it seems like it's really stressing you out. And so I think that's kind of how I tend to approach it. And you can do that in a variety of ways. Certainly values is one of them, but just picking and choosing those things and identifying the problems and why they aren't working for that person is a good way to go, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a huge advocate for identifying one's personal purpose, why you exist, and aligning that personal purpose with that of your primary vocation, what you're investing your time to get an economic return for. What's your primary methodology that you use to help individuals identify their personal purpose? It was only later in life for me that I could really put my finger on what my personal purpose is. Mine is to teach, coach, mentor, inspire. I know that now, but there's so many that are wandering around without that connection to their personal purpose, to their work. How do you help them identify their personal purpose?
I think that also goes back to the values work. And I think that can be done in a lot of different ways. I mean, more formally, there's certainly like assessments you can take. Some of them are well-researched, some of them are not. But for example, we have modification of Shalom Schwartz's work on our website. And that is one way to sort of start the conversation about what is my personal values, like what is important to me. Those kind of help direct people. But you can also just ask yourself simple questions. Like one we like to use is, who is it that I admire? Right. So like, why do you admire that person? What characteristics do they have that you may wish that you either had or want more of? And then that's a way to open up that conversation. Or if you had no restrictions, like money, time, location, whatever, like family obligations, what would you actually be doing? And a lot of times people don't know, or they say something that, oh, I'd be like on a beach somewhere. But oftentimes they wouldn't be on a beach somewhere. So figuring out what that actually looks like is also an interesting way to kind of start that conversation, because it does take a while, which is also something people don't like, because people are complicated and it's hard to get underneath all of that baggage and all of that time to figure out what's in there, because it's still in there. You just have sort of forgotten about it.
Yeah, and you talked about how that's difficult work to engage in. It takes time, it takes energy, and a lot of people don't really like to expend that kind of energy. Now you think about that in a business context. You're the senior executive team, and you've got to sit around and define the purpose of your business. A lot of executives don't like to make that investment, but I contend it's such valuable work to really define the purpose of the business so that your people can then make connect those dots from their personal purpose to the purpose of the business they're working for, and then things get a lot easier when those two things are aligned. Would you concur?
Yes, absolutely. And I think, because what happens if you don't have a purpose and values that are clearly stated and understood is that you end up doing a lot of things that are wasteful in terms of time and money. You have employees who are maybe not necessarily at work for the reasons that would be most helpful to you. You don't have a cohesive team. It's like people are sort of wandering around in space doing these tasks, and they're not really as integrated into the company as they should be. But if you have a very clear purpose, goals, values, what's important, those people will be attracted to your company. Things work so much better, so much more smoothly, efficiently. Decisions are easier to make. People make more money. It's just there's no reason to not have that, except that it is an upfront cost of time mostly. Right. And also I think a lot of people don't necessarily know how to go about doing that effectively. But if you can just put in that extra time in the beginning, then everything just sort of sails through a lot easier.
Yeah. It takes a lot of the artificial barriers to success down. Dr. Koretz, as we close out the show, I've got 3 lightning round questions for you. So let's have a little bit of fun.
Right. Yes.
I've indicated my personal purpose: teach, coach, mentor, and hopefully do a little bit of inspiring along the way. If I asked you to define your purpose, why you exist, what would that be?
That's not a lightning round question, in my opinion, but I think that from a very broad perspective, I have to admit, I don't know. And that's actually something I've thought a lot about lately. But I think on a smaller scale right now, my purpose is certainly to help people. But yeah, so that's where I comfortably land.
Yeah. And I love the response, because you're in the biz and you're still, you don't have a definitive answer for that. And a lot of people think, when I ask them this question, what's your purpose? They get all uptight that they don't have the answer. And you just provided grace and permission to a lot of folks that the answer is hard. And it does take time. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Now, number 2, I give you access to a time machine, and you can send a message to an earlier version of Dr. Janna Koretz. What's the message, and what previous version of yourself do you choose to send it to?
I think probably in my early 20s, it would have been nice to really know and feel that perspective that you gain as you age about what is and isn't important, and how to not get stuck in the weeds of things, smaller day-to-day things that might not actually matter, that cause a lot of distress. So I think, what is it? People say, there's a phrase about that, like, youth is wasted on the young, or something like that.
Yes, it is.
yes, right. So, not to offend anybody by that statement, but I think about that a lot. About, wow, if I could just if I had known that, my life would have been a little bit different, I think.
Yeah, I have several guests on the show lately that have been talking about delineating between the urgent and the important, and
I like that.
And being able to make that distinction and stop spinning around the urgent and spend at least part of your time on what's truly important, and being able to define that. I think we'd all be just a little bit better off. So final lightning round question. We are all works in progress. What are you focused on right now in your personal journey of growth as a leader?
I think I may have just wrapped up a segment of my growth as a leader. Well, no one's ever fully wrapped, but I had for a long time been working on delegating and really just allowing other people to do things that might be different than me, and realizing also that actually might be better. And that's really cool. So kind of working on that. And then I think right now I'm trying to be more creative as we move forward. And I've always been open to all kinds of things in terms of personnel or systems or things like that. But I'm really trying to get creative about, what's next for us, and, how are we going to do this app, and, what's it going to look like, and things like that. So I think I'm hopefully entering into a creativity phase as a leader, but we'll see if it comes to fruition.
Excellent. Well, I wish you all the best. Please tell our listeners where they can learn more about you and Azimuth.
Yes, and I always joke that I picked the worst company name to talk about because it's very hard to spell. But our website has everything on it. So it's azimuthpsych.com. I'll spell it, I guess, AZIMUTH, psych.com. And that has, all of the resources that we've been in that can help sort of direct people into what they're looking for. We have a couple really interesting free tools like the Values Navigator. We have a career enmeshment test and a burnout calculator, which a lot of people enjoy, and all of that. So anything, I can try to keep it all there so it's in one place and people can learn more about it.
That's excellent. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, for sharing your wisdom with our listeners today.
Of course, I'm really happy to. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, my name is Andy Tempty. This is the Balancing Act podcast. You can find us on all the major streaming services. Please like, subscribe, rate, and most importantly, share this impactful conversation with your friends and your colleagues. The show was produced by Nicholas Tempty. We will see you next time on The Balancing Act.